Canada and the United States. Maybe not the final that we expected, but with the way the group stage went, Canada taking the top seed, the US had to do their thing in the 4-5 match, and that leads us to this moment. Canada and their arch rivals again. You remember so many of these matches before, whether it's the Olympics, whether it's the W Championship final, so many bodies of work to draw on here. But lots of questions for both sides. Let's start with this one here, Oliver Platt. It's a simple question. Who has the edge, Canada, the number 1 seed, or the US, the perennial favorites heading into the semifinal?
The US has the edge, and I would say a pretty decent edge, in my opinion. Canada is the underdog in this game for a few reasons. I still think, although the gap is closer than it has been in the past, there is more talent on the US roster. It's a deeper roster. In particular, I think there are more match winners as well, as much as they, or particularly Alex Morgan is maybe in the latter stages of her career. She's still a difference-making player. Lindsay Horan is still there. Rose Lavelle came off the bench in the last game. That shows you the depth of quality they have. They have some up-and-coming young players like Jaden Shaw, who's been very good. So I just, when I picture this game and what I think it's going to look like, I find it easier to picture the type of game that the US wins. And that's the type of game that we're seeing here, that they played against Colombia, going back to a team that's great in transition, that is just more physical than anyone else in the tournament, wins their duels, and kind of kills you on those quick breaks. I find that type of game easier to imagine in my head than the type of game that Canada can win. I do think Canada has a good chance, but I have to give the US the edge, and I think they're decent favorites by a decent margin.
Gareth Wheeler.
Yeah, of course, the United States are favorites. We'd be kidding ourselves if we thought otherwise, especially history speaks volumes. Canada rarely wins on American soil. In fact, the last time the Canadian women's national team won on American soil, it was November 11th of the year 2000. I'm not even sure if you were born yet, Adam, in Columbus, Ohio. And since that time, they have played 21 times on American soil. Anyone want to render a guess what Canada's record is over that span?
I think it starts with
0 wins, 1 draw, 20 losses. This is as lopsided as it gets when you're playing on American soil. And Canada rarely scores a goal. Like Canada winning the Olympics in front of in an empty stadium in Japan. The 4-3 loss at the Olympics where they put 3 past the United States. These are the outliers. Recent games, 2-0 loss, 1-0 loss, 3-0 loss, 2-0 loss, 3-1 loss, 2-0 loss. These are all on American soil. So it hasn't really been that close whatsoever. Now, the argument can be made that this US side is nowhere near as good. Emma Hayes is coming in. They're in transition. This Canada side, they're in a little bit of transition as well in terms of some of the experienced players coming out and some of the younger players getting an opportunity. So there is a significant gap there. But based upon history, recent and otherwise, the United States should be significant favorites heading into this game.
Jordan Wilson, of course, I want to see if you make this unanimous or not, but we had plenty of conversations during the quarterfinal at the restaurant after the fact, digesting the game and coming up with answers and predictions. So when we think about the most important decisions that Bev Priestman is probably going to have to make in this game, it's the lineup. So in order to get the best out of this group, who, remember, needed an Evelyn Vienne goal in the 104th minute to even be here because no one seemed to score, what do you think Bev Priestman's most crucial lineup decision is?
I think in a match where you should have scored many goals and you only scrape by with 1, I think directly you got to go to position the number 9 and who's going to score. So I would say that number 9 between Deanne Rose, Jordan Heidema, if it's Olivia Smith. I know that she has talent, but to go and start her at the number 9 when she hasn't played there for Bev ever, only been subbed on for the last minutes of games. That's probably the biggest thing, because Canada, in a game where you're playing the States, you're not going to get too many opportunities to score. You want someone that's confident when they get a shot to maybe put it past the keeper as well. And if you're going off the last match, it wasn't a poor performance because the first half Canada played well, but again, there was no one that looked confident in front of goal. So I'd say that number 9 position is huge. I think another thing as well, the other two that I would take into consideration would be the midfield. If you're going to play that 3-4-3, Wheels, we've talked about it so many times, just outnumbering the midfield. If the way that the Americans play and Horan is free to basically roam and do what she likes, 3 against 2 in that midfield, you're going to need legs. You're going to need people that are organized. So how do you play that way? And then I think also just left wing back. Do you put Lacasse there and take her away from a winger position where she is dangerous coming down that left side? Do you put someone else at the top? Do you play Gabby Carl? I know obviously in an ideal world when Janine Becky or Jade Riviere or Sydney Collins, if one of them are healthy, they're probably playing in that spot. But that's not the case for tomorrow's match. So Bev has some big decisions to make, because I think with this United States team, they're very aggressive. They press. They're a bit more primitive, but that's still going to be a challenge for the Canadians, and they're going to need a strong 11 to come out and really start that match. So I think those are pressing issues going into tomorrow.
Oliver Platt?
Yeah, Jordan's right. I think it's centre forward and central midfield in particular that they're the two big ones. I don't think VN will keep her place despite the goal. I think Bev is going to look at this as a completely different type of game and look to Haitema or Deanne Rose, who give you kind of different things, both of which I think could be potentially useful in this game. I don't think Rose has had a great tournament, but she does give you a bit more pace in behind and ability to play on the break. I personally think it will be Haitema, who, has started the past 2 games, didn't have a great game in the quarterfinal by any stretch, but I think has played better for Canada since the World Cup and gives you some qualities that you maybe want in this game. And then the midfield for me is a bit of a worry. I don't think since they switched the formation and they've gone to a 2-player midfield that partnership has really been massively tested in a defensive sense. I know they've played Australia and Brazil last year, but those games didn't quite have the intensity that they're going to get on Wednesday night. And I just wonder about Canada's ability to win the battle in that area when you're going up against the US team that seems to have settled on, 2 pretty safe players, to be honest with you, in Coffey and Albert deeper in midfield, and then Lindsay Horan given more freedom to play further forwards. That could be, it's potentially a 2v3. Can they win that battle? Can the centre-backs help them win that battle? Who do they select, obviously, alongside Fleming? That's a big decision, and I think a big area to watch.
Yeah, the Awujo versus Quinn in that double pivot with Fleming's an interesting one. I'd be curious if Bev would be so brave in terms of something we haven't seen from her in this tournament. Play Lacasse at the left wing back, and you put someone like Deanna Rose at left wing. That's just
You're going to make a change. You change the formation.
You got to decide how bold you want to be heading into this game, Gareth. I totally agree with you. And understanding what we expect to happen based on history, based on eye test, based on numbers, all these things. I'm going to ask you this question quite simply, take it any direction you want. Canada wins this match against the US if blank.
They're able to score from set pieces, because that's looks like the only way forward when they're playing against better competition, more organized teams. That's the only way that they look like they're a threat to find the back of the net on a regular basis. Look, it's Jill off a set piece. It's Fleming. I know she missed a penalty from a penalty spot or a free kick. Like, these are the way forward for this team, because they haven't shown me any outstanding evolution in terms of the way that they attack when they play really good teams. It seems still a little bit basic for me. That needs to evolve over time. It's fine when you play Paraguay or Costa Rica and teams like that. I mean, it almost wasn't against Costa Rica, but they still lack a little bit of punch in that area. So set pieces, keep it locked down defensively. I think they have a good back 3. The United States haven't been a free scoring team in their own right. Keep the game in front of you, attack on the counter attack, take advantage of set piece situations. Seems like the best way forward for me.
Oliver Platt.
I'll pick out one area of the pitch. I think if Canada's going to win this game, they've got to play to their biggest strength, and to me, that's the right side of the pitch. I do think that that aspect of their attack has evolved. The left side has been a bigger issue, and there are questions there as to who plays and when they get players back from injury, what that side of the field is going to look like. But the right side, I think, is strong. Jade Rose, Ashley Lawrence, Adriana Leon, they've played well through this tournament and since the World Cup over the longer term. And I think they've got to try and make the most of that side of the pitch. That's where a lot of the threat comes from. Lacasse played out on the right, obviously, in that first game as well, and was very effective from wing back. And you look at the matchup against the US left, where I think they've got 2 really talented players in Shaw and Niswanger, but they're both young. Niswanger's 23, Shaw's 19. They both have fewer than 10 caps. They played really well against Colombia in the quarterfinal, but I think Canada will fancy that matchup against two more inexperienced players with some of their best players on that side of the field.
Jordan Wilson.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Canada go to the finals if they defend well. I think this is still going to be an area. This has been their bread and butter in the past, but I think you can maybe get a break with someone being clinical at the number 9 or attacking options or set pieces, as Wheel said. But it's going to come down to gritty, hard-nosed, organized defending, which would frustrate the Americans. I think Mexico did it in some degree, but it's just going to be one of those matches where if the U.S. are throwing all that they have going forward and Canada standing there and they're ready to take it, and also on that wave going and countering as well, I think it will frustrate the Americans. I think Gilles, Buchanan, Rose, Sheridan, they all need to have their best game for it to be possible to really go the 90 minutes or even extra time with this American team.
Garrett, this is almost, I don't even want to call it the elephant in the room because I think everyone knows that it's been there for some time. Tokyo aside, and again, we always preface it by saying not to diminish the accomplishment. They have the gold medal around their neck. But every time they go into a tournament, specifically in CONCACAF, the first 3, 4, sometimes 5 matches are all the tune-up for the big one at the end, whether it's the Americans now in recent times, it's Mexico, it's Brazil in this expanded W Gold Cup format. But it all comes down to this game. So you can say you made it the semifinal, but everyone cares about this moment. It's kind of, to use a CPL analogy, cavalry in the final. Like, this is all the season and then the work comes down to is this match. So if Bev Priestman and this Canadian women's national team falls short against the Americans, again, despite not conceding a goal through 4 matches, scoring for fun in the first 3, what does it mean? What's on the line here in the semifinal?
Well, I think the way that it gets spun really reflects upon the result, because those who follow and will speak about this team on a regular basis, if they end up beating the United States, it'll be a monumental result. It'll be, look at Canada moving in the right direction in this new kind of leadership group of the team. But if they lose, some people might just kind of push it to the side and say, well, it really doesn't matter much. It's the Gold Cup, and they're still figuring things out. And they have a lot of injuries on the left-hand side and this, that, and the other. I see one of those two responses playing out. That's why I don't think there's a lot on the line for Canada here. They're underdogs. They have a manager, for me, who has all the comfort and protection in the world by virtue of getting a new contract, which funny enough came a month before the new general secretary, who's now her boss, was hired. It seems like one should have happened before the other, but they happen the other way around. So there's no pressure on Bev Priestman to produce right now. Perhaps she'll be under more stiffer potential criticism depending on how they fare in the Olympics. If it's anything like the World Cup, then maybe things will heat up a little bit, but she's comfort as well. I think there's a lot of comfort around this national team at present time. And we'll see what that means exactly. I always think that being a little bit uncomfortable is always renders the best results. So we'll see how this works. Yeah. So honestly, Adam, a berth in the final would be great, but I think it can be spun either way, depending on the results.
I think what's fascinating about that there is that was something that I had asked Bev about before the match against Costa Rica in the semis. What's been the biggest change for you since the 50 caps in the World Cup disappointment? And she admitted that with everything going on off the field, notably the labor dispute, which is back again, it was announced before this tournament, the day before the opener, that she was doing everything she could to make the group feel comfortable and try and take that pressure off. And she says, I don't perform my best. And clearly after the World Cup, the group doesn't perform their best when they're comfortable. So it's going to be interesting to see how she turns the screws in the right way before this mega game against the Americans, which of course is on One Soccer tomorrow night with a full match day live show to get you teed up with Danny Petrillo, Jordan Wilson, and Jess Lisi. We are a bit at the mercy of the first semifinal, so should that go to extra time or PKs, we might be pushed a little bit later, but we are expecting a 7:15 p.m. Pacific time kickoff, and we hope you will join us tomorrow for the big one
ever, San Diego
W Gold Cup. Ollie's going to be enjoying Snapdragon Stadium, I am sure.